In the 2 decades since the pumpkin spice latte first appeared at Starbucks, every company the nation over has tried to cash in on the flavor's success. From the sober and intelligent pumpkin spice Twinkies to the deranged and chaotic pumpkin spice spam. But where did pumpkin spice come from? How did it get so popular? And what exactly is pumpkin spice? Today on Weird History Food, we're scooping out the history of pumpkin spice. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. And let us know in the comments below what other pop culture food crazes you would like to hear about. All right, slide into those Ugg boots and let's get falling. Pumpkin spice, also known as pumpkin pie spice, is typically made from a combination of Southeast Asian ingredients: ground cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and sometimes ginger. Allspice is occasionally thrown into the mix too, but that comes from central Mexico or the Caribbean, and it enters our story a bit later. But kind of like how beard oil isn't made by grinding up beards, there is no actual pumpkin in pumpkin spice. Instead, pumpkin spice is meant to be paired with pumpkin, or with whatever. Pringles maybe. Maybe not. How did this come to be? Well, way back in the 1400s, Europeans were sick of their native spices. Rosemary, parsley, sage, and thyme were no longer cutting it. Sorry, Simon and Garfunkel. Sure, they'd imported cinnamon and ginger from Arab and Asian traders as far back as Roman times. But when the Ottoman Empire seized control of Constantinople in 1453, their Silk Road ties to Eastern spices were severed. So European traders and explorers took to the sea themselves, launching the Age of Exploration, as fortune seekers across the continent looked for large spice hauls around the globe. Among their primary destinations were the Banda Islands, believed at the time to be the only place on Earth that grew nutmeg. Back in Europe, just 1 pound of nutmeg was worth 7 whole oxen. We were using ox-based currency back then. For comparison, that's more oxen than you could get for a comparable amount of gold. Yeah, but how much is that in Doge? So traders flocked to the Banda Islands en masse, and they picked up other spices in the surrounding regions along the way. Because of the effort required for Europeans to reach Indonesia and Sri Lanka, cinnamon, cloves, and ginger became high-end commodities too. All 4 ingredients were typically reserved for special occasions within Europe, primarily used on feast days, such as Christmas and Twelfth Night, which is the celebration in which everyone gets together to watch the Amanda Bynes film She's the Man. It likewise didn't take long for these hot climate flavors to become synonymous with Europe's cold season. Over time, trade routes expanded, and many European nations began to colonize the areas with the best spices, driving their prices down and making them more accessible for everyday Europeans. Still, no medieval Europeans had even so much as heard of a pumpkin before. Jack Skellington wept. It wouldn't be until the exploration of an entirely new continent that the term pumpkin came into the English lexicon, and it would take the colonization of that continent to establish pumpkin spice as the specific flavor combo it is today. Asian spices remained a valuable commodity to the Europeans for centuries to come. The Dutch even traded New Amsterdam to Britain for one of the Banda Islands in 1674, an exchange that saw New Amsterdam renamed to New York. And that guaranteed a They Might Be Giants shout-out over 3 centuries later. As the Asian holiday spice combo became more available to European consumers, it just needed an identifying flavor to give it a less clunky name. Foods should take as few syllables as possible to order. Enter the pumpkin. Pumpkins are a type of warm-weather winter squash that originated in what is now the southern United States and northeastern parts of Mexico. Its name derived from the Greek word for a large melon, pepon, which eventually made it into British English as pompon, which kind of sounds like a British guy asking if you need any gas. Native Americans were cultivating pumpkins as early as 3500 BC, making it one of the oldest known farmed crops in the Western Hemisphere. The first Europeans to reach North America were likewise introduced to this vine fruit upon reaching the New World. And it wasn't long before they brought the first pumpkins back with them to Europe. For instance, as early as 1515, less than 25 years after Columbus first landed in the Americas, Renaissance painter Raphael Sanzio was putting North American gourds on the ceiling of the Villa Farnesina in Rome. They were so hyped about pumpkins, they were putting them in frescoes. It's believed that the Mayflower Pilgrims may have eaten pumpkin at the first Thanksgiving, securing its place as an American fall flavor for centuries to come. As time wore on, and previously rare spices were increasingly cultivated in new locations across the globe, their value dropped, and they became affordable for the average person, which encouraged people to experiment. In Britain, this meant mixing cinnamon and nutmeg into blood puddings and meaty mince pies. In America, this meant mixing it with pumpkin. There's just something about a pumpkin. It demands your attention and your spices. Amelia Simmons' 1796 cookbook, American Cookery, the first known cookbook to be written and published by an American, features several recipes that today are synonymous with the American holiday season. These include the first ever documented suggestion to pair turkey with cranberry, and the first ever recipes for spiced pumpkin pie. It also contains the first known pairing of fried chicken and televised professional wrestling, but that recipe gets far less attention. In one of these pumpkin pie recipes, she suggests mixing pumpkin with ginger and nutmeg. In another, she suggests using ginger and allspice. It didn't take long for bakers across America to take up Simmons' recipes and make them their own. And by the end of the following century, many cookbooks began referring to the combination of nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon, and clove simply as pumpkin pie spice. Still, it wasn't until a half-century later, in 1934, that McCormick & Company released the first ever pre-mixed version of pumpkin pie spice. The world would never be the same. While pumpkin pie spice lived out the next 70 years as a useful addition to any holiday dessert, it wasn't until 2003 that a handful of mad scientists gave it a life all its own. Legend has it that a small group met in the ultra-secret Liquid Lab, located on the 7th floor of Starbucks headquarters, presumably in the presence of several armed guards. Since the previous season's Peppermint Mocha was a hit for the company, Starbucks directed Peter Dukes, the then product manager of Espresso, to get with his team and bolster their beverage lineup for the upcoming holidays. According to Dukes, they brewed 100 different ideas for the job. And after running about 10 of them by a consumer group for market viability, they had nearly settled on a much more boring flavor like chocolate or caramel. But on one fateful day, the team brought actual pumpkin pies into the lab and drenched them in loads of espresso. This is normally grounds for a fist fight, but the team ate the espresso-soaked pies instead, and their lives changed in an instant. All of that consumer group testing for a chocolate or caramel drink went out the window, as the team dropped all other ideas to focus on creating the perfect pumpkin pie-inspired beverage. To do so, they developed a sauce that could be mixed into Starbucks' existing lattes, and they topped it off with whipped cream and all of the standard pumpkin pie spice ingredients. Years later, the recipe would also come to include actual pumpkin puree, presumably to thwart pedantic trivia nerds. Yes, we know there's no pumpkin in pumpkin spice. As it was first getting off the ground, they nearly named the drink the Fall Harvest Latte, but they opted for the slightly less obnoxious pumpkin spice just before the drink's release. And when it hit limited stores in October of 2003, it was an immediate success. It wasn't long before it got a national release. With the rise of social media, it soon became a ubiquitous part of Starbucks' fall lineup. Today, Dukes is Starbucks' Director of Store Development Market Strategy, which we assume is dense corporate speak for Keeper of the Spice. But his team's creation has gone on to direct the entire fall season. In the 2 decades since its initial release, Starbucks has sold over 200 million pumpkin spice drinks, which now include not only lattes, but cold brews and chai teas as well. What's more, pumpkin spice lovers can enjoy Starbucks' signature flavor at home, with both bags of pre-ground pumpkin spice coffee beans, along with K-cups and pre-made cold brews. You never have to taste anything else if you don't want to. As any successful artist can tell you, once you make it big, everyone's gonna want a piece of the pie. As other companies saw Starbucks' success, nearly everyone has tried to cash in on the pumpkin spice craze that swept the nation. Among the more popular products are pre-made desserts and dessert mixes, including pumpkin spice Oreos, Hostess's iced pumpkin cupcakes, and pumpkin spice cookie dough from both Toll House and Pillsbury. These are all net goods, which you can tell by each product's ability to be dunked in pumpkin spice lattes. Speaking of which, Dunkin', Coffee Mate, and International Delight all also have their very own pumpkin-spiced flavor coffee creamers. And Jet Puffed makes pumpkin spice marshmallows if you're looking for that extra kick to your morning beverage. Or if you just want to make some truly bitchin' s'mores. And if that's not pumpkin-y enough to start your morning, you can pair your pumpkin spice coffee with pumpkin spice Cheerios or Frosted Mini Wheats, one of Thomas's pumpkin spice bagels, English muffins, or swirl breads, or even indulge in a whopping spoonful of Philadelphia's pumpkin spice cream cheese spread. If you spread that on a pumpkin spice bagel, the Starbucks mermaid appears and gives you the key to the city. On the savory end of things, companies have also put out pumpkin spice Pringles, pumpkin spice hummus, pumpkin spice chicken sausage, and even a pumpkin spice latte burger. That sounds like a recipe for a pumpkin spice stomachache. But fortune and flavor favors the bold. You can't even joke about pumpkin spice unless you're prepared to back it up. Hormel Foods learned that the hard way back in 2017, when the brand jokingly shared a photo of pumpkin spice Spam, a totally fake product meant to playfully fool the public. But the public's response was shockingly positive, and just 2 years later, Hormel Foods put out an all-too-real limited edition pumpkin spice Spam. Every last can was sold in just 7 hours. It was the most excited anyone has ever been about eating Spam. Still, for those of us whose appetites can't be satiated by food and drink alone, there's always pumpkin spice deodorant, pumpkin spice toothpaste, and even pumpkin spice cough drops, for people who like to eat personal hygiene products. Maybe you can have too much of a good thing. Like with any fad, for every person who loves a good pumpkin spice Swiss Miss Cocoa, there is a whole horde of people who love to hate that person. And we get it. It's kind of annoying when a trend gets so popular you can't seem to avoid it no matter where you look. Wait, pumpkin spice cup noodles? But regardless of what any haters may think, the reason you see pumpkin spice everywhere is because most of us love it. The United States alone spends over $500 million every year on pumpkin spice flavored products. Some scientists have chalked this love affair up to nostalgia. People develop warm emotions towards the holiday seasons, and they therefore give outsized attention to anything that brings back good memories, especially scents or flavors. Have you ever had a smell instantly take you back to a memory from 7 years ago? Pumpkin spice scratches that same itch. Others write it off as a recession-era comfort. While Starbucks pumpkin spice latte first came out in 2003, it didn't truly become the cultural behemoth it is today until 2008, when we were all chugging caffeine and waiting for The Big Short to finally come out and explain what the hell just happened. Either way, everyone seems to agree on one thing. Pumpkin spice's success relies on its limited release window. Without it, it would just become another year-round flavor, like chocolate or caramel. And it might lose its allure to fall fanatics everywhere, which would be a shame. We're really looking forward to trying those cup noodles. For many, the noble turkey is a holiday icon, the headliner of Thanksgiving dinner, accompanied by its opening acts, stuffing and gravy. But just how did America come to associate its only native bird with its biggest binge-eating day of the year? Well, today we're writing the cookbook on how turkeys became the Thanksgiving bird of choice. All right, all aboard the gravy train. Turkeys have been around for millions of years. All 6 subspecies of turkey are native to North America, and they are separated from their more chickeny counterparts by at least 45 million years of evolution. They sleep in trees, they can fly short distances, and they can run at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour, faster if they're on rocket skates. Though there is evidence that ancient Native Americans farmed turkeys in what is now the southwestern United States, it's believed that turkeys weren't widely domesticated until about 2,000 years ago, when the Mayans first started breeding them for both food and for ritualistic purposes. Since these Mexican turkeys were the largest population of domesticated gobblers around, they were the first group of turkeys that the Spanish conquistadors came in contact with. Lo odio. Because a bird of that size gets everyone excited, the Spanish then started shipping turkeys back home as early as 1519. Turkey farms soon proliferated across Europe, and by the 1600s, they had become a commonplace food source for many Western Europeans. Many 17th century Brits even began incorporating turkey into their own feast days, as turkeys are huge, capable of growing well over 20 pounds in the wild, and can feed a ton of people all at once. It therefore follows that, as America's earliest settlers came to stake their claim in the New World, many brought these giant turkeys with them. like coolers on a road trip. And because of this back and forth importation, most domesticated turkeys today, even those bred in North American regions where other subspecies of wild turkey are dominant, are usually the descendants of those early Mexican turkeys. When, in September of 1620, the Pilgrims first landed at Plymouth Rock, they didn't have any of those Mexican turkeys with them. In fact, it's not historically certain that they had any livestock with them at all. Instead, they had a supply of beer, biscuits, peas, and dried meats, among other basic provisions. And to be fair, many of us have gone on trips where beer and beef jerky were our only provisions. It wasn't enough, though, and as the story goes, the first winter in the New World was devastating for the Pilgrims. Of the initial 102 that came over from Europe, only 53 survived their first year in America. So making it through that first year was a real achievement, and the first Thanksgiving, which took place sometime after the 1621 harvest, was probably a pretty rowdy party. The settlers were joined for their 3-day feast by about 90 people of the Wampanoag tribe, who brought with them 5 whole deer as a gift for the colony's governor. Even with all of this food and all of these guests, though, the first Thanksgiving was seemingly unnoteworthy to the Pilgrims. Harvest feasts were common back in Europe, and days of Thanksgiving were regularly held back in England. Consequently, there is only one known first-hand account of this historic meal, and it comes in the form of a letter written by Edward Winslow. Winslow wrote, "Our governor sent 4 men on fowling. They 4 in one day killed as much fowl as served the company almost a week." Unfortunately, fowl can refer to all sorts of different birds, and historians today are likewise uncertain as to exactly what type of bird was eaten at the first Thanksgiving. What we do know is that whatever kind of bird it was, these dudes shot a week's worth of them in one very loud day. Some doubt it was turkey, though, and instead argue that duck or goose were more likely to have been served. But others point to the writings of William Bradford, the elected leader of the Plymouth colony, who told of the large store of turkeys the colonists managed to stockpile that fall. Still, regardless of whether or not they dipped into that stockpile, whatever fowl the Pilgrims served was most likely just a side dish rather than the meal's centerpiece. After all, the Wampanoag did bring 5 whole deer. In the decades that followed, settlers and early Americans continued to hold such harvest feasts, but few associated them with the Plymouth Rock Pilgrims. Instead, they were simply continuing their own European traditions, just as the OG Pilgrims had, a practice that continued on without disruption until the American Revolution. As the U.S. broke away from British rule and attempted to form a unique national identity, many turned to America's native birds for culinary inspiration. The turkey became a national symbol for many Americans, and it became increasingly commonplace on post-revolutionary dinner tables. Despite the popular myth, Benjamin Franklin never actually pushed for the turkey to become the national bird. But he did go on the record saying that turkeys are much more respectable than bald eagles. But how do they taste with gravy? No, we're seriously asking. Likewise, Alexander Hamilton supposedly once asserted that no citizen of the U.S. shall refrain from turkey on Thanksgiving Day. The Founding Fathers were big into turkey hash. Despite these declarations, things didn't truly get moving until Sarah Josepha Hale, most famous today for having written the absolute banger Mary Had a Little Lamb, published her first ever novel, Northwood. Northwood is an 1827 anti-slavery work that spends an entire chapter detailing an idyllic New England Thanksgiving, complete with a roasted turkey placed at the head of the table. At the time, Thanksgiving was mostly celebrated regionally, with the New England states taking it the most seriously, kind of like Dunkin' Donuts. Likewise, many individual states had their own official Thanksgiving days, with Thanksgiving being held anywhere from October to January, depending on where you lived. Although George Washington himself declared November's final Thursday to be a day of public thanksgiving and prayer in 1789, it was supposed to be a one-time event rather than an annual holiday. But since America had been heading towards a civil war for, well, just about as long as America had been a country, Hale saw an opportunity to unify the fracturing nation. She thought that nationalizing the Thanksgiving holiday around one shared special day would help create a national identity, and thus keep the country together. So, Hale actively campaigned for the establishment of Thanksgiving as a national holiday. It was through her work that people began looking back to the first Thanksgiving, and myths about the Pilgrims began to form. which included everything from the buckled hats and buckled shoes that the pilgrims didn't actually wear, to a whole list of Thanksgiving foods that pilgrims didn't actually eat. Among these made-up foods were pumpkin pie, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and a big stuffed turkey. Creating a national mythology around Thanksgiving still wasn't enough for Hale, who began a letter-writing blitz to America's presidents to convince them to embrace Thanksgiving as a vehicle for national unity. Reportedly, she wrote to Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan, until she finally got to a president who mattered, Abraham Lincoln. Whether he was inspired or just tired from hearing from Hale. In 1863, Lincoln held the first ever National Thanksgiving. While it was a little too late for national unity, Hale was still dubbed the Mother of Thanksgiving, and after 30 years of work, she was finally able to celebrate the holiday. By the time Thanksgiving became a national holiday, turkey farms were popping up just about everywhere. While many today idealize the Wild West with images of cowboys and their cattle drives, many forgot the far less romanticized turkey drovers and their turkey walks. John Wayne should have made more movies about these guys. Since refrigeration in the 1880s was still hard to come by, and transportation was likewise driven by steam or by horse, the easiest way to get thousands of turkeys from farms to cities was to walk them. Reports from the mid-19th century detailed drovers walking as many as 500 turkeys at a time from remote homesteads to train stations or towns, often having to travel hundreds of miles just to get to where the turkeys were going. As you might expect, this could be a long, slow process. To motivate these turkeys, the drovers would need to either entice them forward with a steady supply of corn or guide them from behind by pushing them with a long pole. On a good day, these turkeys could travel about a mile per hour. On a bad day, the birds could become overly clustered and trample each other to death. What's more, turkeys' propensity for sleeping up in trees often caused all sorts of issues for the towns they passed through. Namely, they would often all gather to sleep on rooftops, causing the roofs to collapse in on themselves. That's not the kind of turkey stuffing we were picturing. Despite this chaos, these turkey walks continued on well into the 1900s, only coming to a close with the advent of the gasoline truck and presumably driver's licenses for turkeys. During the same time, turkey hunting exploded in popularity, to the point that the birds were nearly hunted to extinction. By the 1900s, there were as few as 30,000 wild turkeys left, a number that has since, with the help of restoration programs and hunting quotas, grown back to a whopping 7 million. That's something to be thankful for. Up until the 1950s, wild and domesticated turkeys were about the same size. But in order to meet America's ever-increasing demand for turkey subs, farmers began selectively breeding their birds. According to the USDA, the average farmed turkey in 1929 weighed about 13.2 pounds. By 1967, that number had increased to 18.6 pounds. Fast forward to today, farmed turkeys now average around 30 pounds, making them over 2 times as heavy as they were less than a century ago. Are these birds juicing? This increase in turkey size has resulted in fewer turkeys needing to be raised, meaning they use up less land and fewer resources. However, most of the birds are now too big to breed without human intervention, and they often have all sorts of other health issues. Today, Butterball turns out the most turkey meat for consumption, followed by Jennie-O and Cargill Protein. Each company individually produces around 1 billion pounds of turkey in any given year, or roughly 1 week of leftovers at your grandmother's house. Of those billion pounds, a large portion comes from the 46 million individual turkeys consumed each year on Thanksgiving Day. Traditionally, starting with Ulysses S. Grant, U.S. presidents would be gifted one of these many turkeys each and every Thanksgiving. By the mid-1900s, this gifting had turned into an all-out ceremony, wherein the president would accept the turkey, and the turkey would, in turn, be taken to the White House kitchens to be eaten that very day. It was a dubious honor. We suspect many of the birds would have preferred a cash prize. While there is some debate over exactly which president was the first to pardon a turkey, the trend didn't truly start until 1982, when Ronald Reagan sent his presidential turkey to live out the rest of its life on a farm. Reagan continued this practice throughout the rest of his presidency, but he kept it to a casual send-off, a low-key hang with just a few friends. It wasn't until 1989, under the presidency of George H.W. Bush, that the first ever official presidential pardon was handed down to a turkey. In the years since, every president has pardoned at least one turkey for the holiday, and it's become tradition for the turkey to be publicly named. Some recent pardoned birds include chocolate, peanut butter, jelly, corn, butter, peas, and drumstick. Nothing says you got lucky like naming a turkey drumstick. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, our ancestors ignited their first flames. Ever since, people have developed faster, safer, and more convenient ways to cook. But with each new development, we've moved further away from the old ways of cooking, further away from the fires that forged us. Still, on hot summer nights, in a little place we like to call America, the call of the flame beckons us back outside to cook. Today on Weird History Food, we're uncovering how the backyard barbecue became an American pastime. Grab yourself a beer and a handful of party poppers, because it's time to fire up the grill. While people have been cooking animals over fire for just about as long as there have been animals and people to cook them, the term barbecue has its origins in the New World. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the Spanish began to explore and to colonize the Caribbean. In the West Indies, they came upon the Taino people, who had a special practice for slow roasting meat and fish on wooden frames set over an open flame. The Spanish recognized the future potato chip flavoring potential of this cooking technique and were intrigued. The Taino had a specific name for this practice, which the Spanish transcribed as barbacoa. From there, the term slowly wormed its way from Spanish to English. Its first known English usage came in 1661, when Captain Edmund Hickeringle wrote an early form of it in his exploratory document, Jamaica Viewed. Over the 50 years that followed, the term would become commonplace in the Anglo-American lexicon. It was only a matter of time before they tried hosting one of these barbecues for themselves. The first detailed account of an Anglo-American barbecue comes from Edward Ward's 1707 publication, The Barbecue Feast, or The Three Pigs of Peckham, Broiled Under an Apple Tree. Man, even the cookbooks back then sounded vaguely haunted. In the book, Ward details a delicious meal found in Peckham, Jamaica, cooked after the West Indian manner, wherein the meat was slathered with a sauce made from green Virginia pepper and Madeira wine. Once North American colonists caught wind of what their neighbors to the south were up to, they wanted in on the fun too. By the mid-1700s, barbecuing grew into a colonial American pastime, particularly in Virginia, where American settlers would take advantage of summer weather by smoking whole animals over pits of fire. Nothing helps beat that summer heat like a hellmouth of roasted pork.
I want to eat barbecue with you. And mind you don't go philandering with any other girl, because I'm mighty jealous.
Apparently, George Washington himself wrote extensively about the practice, spelling barbecue 3 different ways throughout his writings, and identifying early on the need for a universal 3-letter acronym. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, barbecues became the plaything for politicians. These early political leaders would try to garner votes by hosting Independence Day barbecues. Potential voters, wafted into these political rallies by the scent of simmering meat, would show up in droves for the pork, but would stay for the impassioned speeches on the nation's future and the baked bean wrestling. As this practice became particularly widespread in the South, it naturally caught on among the nation's enslaved residents as well. Gathering together for outdoor cooking soon became a cultural cornerstone of American slave communities, and Southern Black American cuisine has been influenced by it ever since. Meanwhile, settlers of the American West, many of whom had found their fortunes ranching, often had to cook over open flames during long cattle drives. Cowboys were regularly fed with the least valuable cuts of meat, which is a polite way of saying the worst, to get them through any given job. Among these, the beef brisket became a particularly reviled throwaway. It was tough and stringy, and no one wanted it, like leather chewing gum. Because it was terrible, it made the perfect cut to feed to workers. But innovating cowboys faced the issue head-on. They quickly discovered that if they let the brisket cook for 6 or 7 hours, it became a delectable treat, worthy of the fanciest roadhouse restaurant, if only they'd thought to invent those. It's through these various avenues that regional styles and flavor profiles first emerged on the American barbecue scene. Even with all that variety, though, building a barbecue pit and lighting all that wood was no easy task. Why even bother eating if you have to do all that work? Hardly seems worth it. It wasn't until new innovations came onto the scene that barbecue became an all-American summer tradition. In 1897, Pennsylvania inventor Ellsworth B. A's Warrior patented the world's first charcoal briquettes. Though charcoal itself had been created and used by humans for thousands of years, Zwoyer's briquettes would allow charcoal to be mass-produced for the first time and easily shipped to store shelves. But waiting just around the corner was the man who would steal Zwoyer's coal-fired thunder. That man was Edward G. Kingsford, and if you've ever eaten a burnt hot dog in a distant relative's backyard, you've probably seen his name before. In 1890, Kingsford married one of Henry Ford's cousins, and he was subsequently hired by Ford to locate a steady supply of hardwood for the production of the Model T. While later touring Ford's manufacturing facility, Kingsford found that a lot of his hard-sought hardwood supply was going to waste. But like spotting a money clip in a public toilet, Kingsford saw an opportunity in that waste. He convinced Ford to open up another manufacturing facility next door, one that took the Model T's leftover wood scraps and turned them into charcoal briquettes. And thus, the supervillainously named Ford Iron Mountain Plant was born, later to be renamed the Kingsford Company. Marrying that sister turned out to be a real smart career move. With the mass production of charcoal briquettes, barbecue was closer than ever to becoming a backyard staple. But there was still a technical issue that needed to be addressed. Up to this point, grilling usually required the construction of a big pit out of a pile of bricks, a process you may recognize as an absolute pain in the ass. Even worse, shoddy craftsmanship often led to uneven cooking, and it was difficult to regulate both the level of heat and the amount of smoke being generated. In other words, most Americans just couldn't do it right. Luckily, George Stephan came to the rescue of all our future cookouts. Stephan was a welder for Weber Brothers Metalworks, a manufacturer based out of Palatine, Illinois. At work, he welded together steel buoys for the Coast Guard on the Great Lakes. At home, though, he loved to grill up steaks in his backyard barbecue pit. While on the job, Stephen got to thinking, what if he could mix his professional expertise with the noble art of backyard meats? What if he could replace the brick pit he had at home with something entirely new, something that would allow him to better control the way he grilled? Sufficiently inspired, Stephan took some rounded steel from the metalworks buoys and built a mock-up of the world's first spherical grill. He used half of a buoy as a basin for his charcoal, fashioned a lid out of some spare rounded metal, and slapped 3 legs to its bottom. And lo, unto the world, George's barbecue kettle was born. He took his new invention to the Weber brothers, and the rest, as they say, is grillstery. Well, somebody says that anyway. A novelty apron, probably. After the end of World War II, thousands of U.S. military personnel remained stationed in the South Pacific. While there, many fell in love with local cultures, and they brought back home with them a hodgepodge of homages to the places they'd been. What emerged was a sort of vague impression of South Pacific culture, mass-produced for the American suburbs in the 1950s. Returning servicemen opened up tiki bars, placed tiki torches and pink flamingos on their patios, and replaced their whiskeys and their gins with tequilas and rums, all sipped out of ceramic tiki cups, of course. But why deck out your patio with tropical-themed kitsch if no one's around to see it? These veterans soon began to throw backyard luau's, and they adopted the South Pacific practice of cooking over open flames. As the practice grew and these early backyard cookers searched for easier ways to grill outdoors, they landed on George Stephan's 1951 invention. Charcoal was easier to cook with than wood, and George's barbecue kettle removed the need for scarring your immaculate green grass lawn with a big brick pit. Though other products predated Stephan's invention by a handful of years, none took off quite like his kettle. By the mid-1950s, George's barbecue kettle had become synonymous with backyard barbecue. Just a few years after its release, it got a fancy redesign and was renamed the Weber Kettle. Based on its out-of-this-world appearance, though, the Weber Kettle was commonly nicknamed Sputnik.
The famous Weber barbecue kettle for Christmas. As a gift, it's never out of season.
Seeing the growing clamor for outdoor grilling, companies like Coleman and Charmglow, who had each been manufacturing gas grills for some time, tapped into this growing home grilling market. Gas grills had been around since the 1930s, but were mostly used in restaurants. However, in the 1940s, they were re-engineered for portability and produced en masse for wartime cooking. One such grill was the Model 520 Coleman Military Burner, also known as the GI Pocket Stove. You can't actually fit it in your pocket, unless you're wearing hammer pants or something. Weighing in at just 3 pounds, this portable gas grill was shipped overseas by the thousands. Making its first appearance in World War II's North African campaigns, it became an essential component of frontline cooking. But this gas gravy train couldn't last forever. At the close of the war, military demand for the portable gas grills plummeted, and the companies that made them had to pivot. They rebranded their grills for the consumer market, and they grabbed tight onto the coattails of charcoal grilling. With this newly emerging competitive market and an American populace that consumed twice the meat of their European contemporaries during this period, backyard barbecue took off as an American pastime, and it hasn't slowed down in the 70 years since.
Gee, Mom, I'm starving. Let's get at this all-American meat.
We were eating so much meat back then, we simply couldn't cook it all in the kitchen. Since the meteoric rise of backyard grilling, the practice has extended far beyond Independence Day. It's become a tradition for both Labor Day and Memorial Day as well. According to one 2020 poll, 68% of U.S. adults grill for the 4th, while 56% grill for each of the other 2 holidays. We assume most of the poll's participants also checked yes next to the option that said, any excuse to whip out the grill, really. Today, gas grills are the most popular type of grill, with about 60% of U.S. households owning at least one. Charcoal grills are a close second, with about 50% of households owning one. But in recent years, different forms of outdoor cooking have also grown in popularity. Sales have been on the rise for pellet smokers, electric smokers, outdoor pizza ovens, turkey fryers, and flat-top griddles. There has also been a sort of renaissance for grilling accessories, seeing the proliferation of pizza stones, broiling baskets, and cooking planks. What's more, outdoor cooking enthusiasts the nation over no longer restrict their grilling to summer nights. 63% of grill owners report using their grills year-round, and 43% admit to grilling during the dead of winter. You'd be hard-pressed to find an American with a mustache who doesn't consider snow to be grillin' weather. 11% say they've even made breakfast on their grill. It's unclear whether they cooked pancakes and eggs or just made some hot dogs in the morning. Over the years, grill enthusiasts have also made their craft into a competitive enterprise. Among the U.S.'s most notable competitions, the World Food Championships features a grilling category with historic face-offs in a variety of disciplines, including barbecue, burgers, and brisket. The Kansas City Barbecue Society also helps put on dozens of major events throughout the year, including the McLouth, Kansas Barbecue Blowout, the Lafayette, Georgia Honeybee Barbecue Competition, and the Owatonna, Minnesota Smokin' in Steel Championship. The prize money for any one of which ranges from $5,000 to $10,000. It may be a far cry from the brick fire pits that inspired it, but backyard grilling has become a staple American pastime, like baseball and drinking beer while watching baseball.
Halloween, the only holiday where it's socially acceptable to go to your neighbor's house demanding food.
Could I just have the candy?
But have you ever thought about where those delicious sweet treats come from? Well, besides that plastic pumpkin on the porch of the house with the lights off that says 1 piece per kid. Today on Weird History Food, we're talking the bizarre backstory of your favorite Halloween candy. Now, let's dump our bags on the floor because we're ready to dig in. First up, we have the most polarizing treat on the market, candy corn. Originally known as chicken feed, it was created by Wonderly Candy Company George Renninger in the 1880s. By 1889, candy corn was also being produced by Goelitz Confectionery, known today as Jelly Belly of Jelly Bean fame. Today, most candy corn is actually manufactured by Brock's Confections because no one thought enough of candy corn to bother trademarking it. People loved agriculture-themed candy, and the 19th century saw a slew of buttercream confections aimed at the rural markets. Think candy chestnuts, candy clovers, and candy turnips. Originally designed as more of a seasonal candy, the brightly flavored morsels, meant to look like pieces of corn on the cob, didn't catch on as a Halloween-specific staple until around 1950. Around 35 million tons of candy corn are produced every year, or 9 billion pieces of individual candy. We also recommend eating candy corn with salted peanuts. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Depending on what bird you ask, the answers may vary.
3.
For the benefit of a great and necessary field of research, there have been several scientific experiments to uncover the secret lick count of the elusive lollipop. Purdue researchers built a licking machine to go at it and came to a final tally of 364. which spurred a University of Michigan student to build his own licking machine, averaging 411 licks. At which point, we hope, someone sat the deans of these very prestigious colleges down to have a serious discussion about what projects their grant money was funding. Meanwhile, mathematicians at NYU came up with 1,000 licks based on calculations regarding the solubility of hard sugar. But Florida scientists came up with double that amount.
2,000, then you get to savor the Tootsie Roll in center.
And chew it.
Nah, you lick that too.
So the answer is it takes somewhere between 364 and 2,000 licks to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Like the mysteries of Stonehenge and the pyramids, Tootsie Pops are one of the last remaining mysteries that science cannot explain. Another enduring mystery of the Tootsie Pop is what we like to call the curse of the starred wrapper. Growing up, you may have heard a rumor that finding the image of a star on your Tootsie wrapper was a golden ticket. If you sent your wrapper in, Tootsie Roll Industries would net you some sort of Willy Wonka-esque prize. Cash? Cavities for life, maybe? As it turns out, neither. The company debunked the rumor on its website, saying, in fact, shooting star appears on 1 in every 4 to 6 Tootsie Pop wrappers, just as frequent as the other images appear. However, we do believe the star is a sign of good luck to come. Since the 80s, Tootsie has responded to the mailers with a consolation prize, a story of a Native American shooting the star down with a bow and arrow and turning it into candy. That honestly raises more questions than it answers. Today, Tootsie Roll Industries is one of the largest candy makers in the world, churning out 64 million morsels every day. Its legacy can be traced to its progenitor, the Tootsie Roll. Created at the turn of the century by Austrian-American candyman Leo Hirschfeld, he patented the formula in 1907. Snickers, the only candy that you can reasonably get away with calling a meal. It's like we added ground-up peanuts to something and suddenly it's lunch. Snickers entered the market in the 1930s, named after the favorite horse of the Mars family, the dynasty behind Mars bars, Milky Ways, Three Musketeers, Twix, basically anything with nougat. Snickers is the crowning jewel in Mars Inc.'s sticky chocolate crown. It is the #1 candy sold in the entire world, bringing in 3.6 billion brought in annually on that one bar alone. That really satisfies. With over 15 million Snickers made daily, you'd think the quality control of Snickers would be a little lax, but no. Every bar has exactly 16 ground-up peanuts. The production of Snickers is so tightly regulated that it was a big deal in 2009 when the weight of the bars was reduced by 9% to prevent overeating. The weight of Snickers has actually varied wildly over the years. It started at 2.5 ounces and ballooned up to 2.75 in 1940 before seeing its weight halved the following decade.
Better? Better.
Hershey's Kisses. What's more enticing as a kid than seeing those little drops covered in shiny foil with a perfect piece of paper sticking out? Any teacher who passed them out was a legend. However, one thing our educational system failed to inform us was that the chocolates we know and love weren't created by Hershey's at all. In 1894, a candyman named Henry Oscar Wilbur invented a sweet by pouring melted chocolate into a tear-shaped mold with a raised insignia reading Wilbur. He called them Wilbur's Buds. Aww. During this time, Milton Hershey, a real Henry Ford of the confectionery world, was figuring out ways to automate the production line for the 1900 release of his Hershey chocolate bar. He saw teardrop shapes could easily be replicated by squirting chocolate onto a flat surface, saving a bunch of time and, one assumes, mold money. Hershey's Kisses were released 14 years after Wilbur's Buds, but the Kiss immediately outsold Buds on the market in 1907, even though the two were basically identical. But Buds still chugged along, keeping pace with the Kiss and various other competitors until 1921, which is when Hershey updated his factories to automate the silver foiling process. Buds, which had been using the foil since its inception, couldn't keep up with the speed in Hershey's mass production. He went on to sue Milton for stealing his idea. Considering Hershey's remains a brand name over 120 years later, and nobody has ever heard of Wilbur's Buds unless they're lying to impress you. Today, the Hershey empire ranks up there as one of the big four chocolatiers, alongside Mars, Cadbury, and Nestle, a lot of it due to Milton Hershey's factory innovations rather than his original ideas for candy. Kisses wasn't even an original name for the treats. An 1856 Webster Dictionary definition for the word already described it as a small piece of confectionery. It would take Hershey's 95 years till they were able to secure the Kisses trademark in 2001, after a survey found that most people already associated the phrase with the product. Sour Patch Kids, the mouth-puckering sour gummy candy that's shaped like kids. Not the most obvious choice for a popular treat, what with the implicit candy cannibalism and the fact that they tend to stick to your teeth. Originally named Mars Men, Sour Patch was created by a guy named Frank Galatoli while he was working for Jared International in Ontario back in the early 70s. By the time the candy made it to America in 1985, Cabbage Patch Kids were all the rage. Martian men became human children as the brand attempted to cash in on the Cabbage Patch trend. The candy even got a new mascot, a tow-headed blonde boy with his tongue lolling out on the cover of the packs. That boy was based on Galatoli's son, Scott, and again leads to some troubling questions. Is the mascot the consumer of the candy, or the child whose likeness you're chomping on? Is it both? Chemistry plays a huge part in the Sour Patch formula. The gummy's coating of tartaric and citric acid, which are activated by protons in saliva, registers on the tongue as sour. There was even an official Sour Patch Kids cereal. You know, what kid doesn't want to wake up in the morning to sour-tasting milk? Sour Patch Kids also joins the ranks of sweets who have branched into ice cream and video games. Shout out to anyone who remembers Capcom's 2011 World Gone Sour on PlayStation. The candy also has the unique distinction of having been used in a beer. Mob Craft Beer introduced Sour Catch, a Belgian pale ale flavored with the candy in 2009. It was sold out by Halloween. If you like your jelly beans big and spicy, shaped like a pill, and tasting like pungent cinnamon, hot tamales are the candy for you. Created in the 1950s by the mad scientists at Just Born Incorporated, hot tamale fit in amid the ranks of their other offerings, Mike and Ike's, Peeps, and Peanut Chews, as candy people either love or would rather die than eat. The movie theater concession staple was named the #1 cinnamon candy in America in 1999. Which is really the ultimate in consolation prizes. I mean, how many other cinnamon candies can you even name? Cinnamon has a long and storied history as a sweet treat. It contains the chemical cinnamaldehyde, which is a skin irritant. So naturally, humans throughout time have been hell-bent on eating it. Cinnamon can be found in the Bible, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and Sanskrit. By the 19th century, we'd figured out how to isolate cinnamaldehyde and put it directly into medicine and, candies. Red Hots, the predecessor to hot tamales, first hit the markets in the 1930s. And ever since then, we've been upping the hot tamales ante. There's Super Hot Tamales, 2011's 3 Alarm Tamales, and Hot Tamale, Fire and Ice. Debuting in 2018, Fire and Ice mixed a discontinued spearmint variant in with cinnamon hot tamales, creating a mouthfeel equivalent of the series finale of Game of Thrones. So less of a song of ice and fire and more of a scream. M&M's, melts in your mouth, not in your hand. While that slogan may sound cute and somewhat dirty, the original slogan for the hard-shelled Mars chocolates actually has a pretty dark history. In 1937, H.I. Rowntree and Company in England began producing a small, hard-shelled candy to sell to British soldiers fighting the Spanish Civil War. Originally called Smarties, not to be confused with the other Smarties candy, they were pitched as snacks that wouldn't go gooey in the heat, keeping hands clean and combat-ready. Working at Rowntree at the time was a shrewd candyman named Forrest Mars, the estranged son of Frank Mars. The father and son had a falling out over who invented the Milky Way bar. The Mars family had all kinds of drama going on behind the scenes. Forrest realized candy sales dropped in the summer, specifically chocolate, which tended to melt in your hand, your purse, or the back pocket of your white linen pants right before an interview. A small, portable, non-melty chocolate candy was just the ace in the hole Forrest needed to return to America with his head held high. He received a patent for his borrowed candy idea in 1941. When World War II broke out, America began rationing. Hershey's had been given control of 100% of the nation's chocolate. Instead of returning to his family, Forrest came up with a plan. He approached Bruce Murray, the son of Hershey's president William Murray, with a proposition from one passed-over kid to another. What if they formed their own chocolate company? And that's how the Mars and Murray Company, or M&M, was born. Originally, their candy was offered exclusively to American forces, but the GIs took them home. By the time the war ended and it was made available to civilians, M&M's already had a head start on cornering the market as the chocolate that won't slop up your clothes. Skittles, nature's fruit-flavored M&Ms. Skittles are produced by Wrigley's, which is owned by none other than Mars Inc., who did eventually get the M&M license when Forrest rejoined his father's company. This really needs to be a gripping Succession-style drama. But while the candies may look alike, and in the case of 2007's chocolate mix Skittles and key lime pie M&Ms, occasionally share a wrapper, they couldn't be more different. While M&M had a famous backstory tied to the most significant war in modern history, the birth of Skittles is a mystery. No one knows who invented Skittles. Most sources point to an uncredited British company as the first producer of Skittles in 1974, before the candy magically appeared in America 5 years later. According to 1994's Taste the Rainbow campaign, a man named Mr. Skittles invented a namesake candy after looking at a rainbow. In actuality, Skittles probably came from the European game called Skittles, which uses a slightly smaller bowling ball that comes in a variety of colors. We prefer the Mr. Skittles story. We save the best for last, and obviously, it's Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And before you ask, no, that's not personal preference talking. It's an unbiased and immutable law of nature. Harry Burnett Reese, HB to his friends, began working at Hershey's Chocolate Factory in 1921, which is not the fun Wonka-esque experience it sounds like. Reese didn't have a lot of options. He'd had to work 3 and sometimes 4 jobs to bring in enough money to feed his wife and 16 kids. That's, too many kids, Reese. Talk about Reese's Pieces. During his 5-year tenure, Reese developed a prescient philosophy. If Hershey's can sell a trainload of chocolates every day, he later said, I can at least make a living making candy. Reese spent 5 years working at Hershey's, taking scrupulous notes, which he then took home and applied to his side hustle, an ad hoc candy shop run out of his basement. He'd started small, producing your basic mints, hard candies, chocolate-covered raisins, candied nuts, and what have you, which he'd sell to nearby department stores. But his dream? Stuffed chocolates. Indeed, it is a dream we all share. One of his early inventions was the Lizzie Bar, named after his daughter, who remembers her dad getting up at 3 a.m. to crack and grate coconuts for his chocolate-covered caramels. By 1926, Reese's various confectionery treats were making him enough money to quit Hershey's to focus on his passion for putting things into chocolate and smushing them together. The company moved from Reese's basement to a nearby Pennsylvania factory, where there was no filling he wouldn't try. Coconuts with caramel, coconuts with cream, coconuts with honeydew. Big coconut guy, Reese was. But to his credit, he also made peppermint creams, chocolate jets, nutties, nougats, peanuts, and raisin clusters to sell as a mixed assortment of chocolates. To round out the grab bag, Reese reached for the closest ingredient he had yet to try, peanut butter, which he'd sandwich in paper cups layered between cooling slabs of Hershey's chocolates. My man had no shame. But the cups were so pretty that Reese ended up putting them in store windows to attract customers. By 1935, they were popular enough to make as a standalone dessert. Then the war broke out, and as we now know, Hershey had the rights to all the chocolate rations. Reese was forced to rely exclusively on his peanut butter cups, as his other chocolates didn't have a Hershey's hookup. But it proved fortunate, and Reese's peanut butter cups became the shining jewel of the family crown. Reese died in 1956, leaving the company to his sons, who in turn sold 5% of their stock to Hershey's for $25 million. Today, that stock would be worth over $1 billion, thanks to its popularity as the best Halloween candy in the world. Not an opinion, that's just science.
Holiday greetings from Budweiser. The people who bring you Budweiser wish you and yours The very best of everything this holiday season.
Outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Nothing melts away the cold like a delicious hot bowl of Campbell's chicken noodle soup.
Let it snow, let it snow.
Campbell's makes everything.
Where's that noise? Go away! Who's there?
The taste of nuts and honey, Mr. Scrooge.
Ah! Humbug. I've better things to do.
But, Mr. Scrooge, it's part of this good breakfast.
My customary gruel will suffice, thank you.
Yeah, but Honey Nut Cheerios blends the taste of real golden honey and nuts.
I said, did you say honey and nuts?
Nobody can say no.
Happy holidays, Mr. Scrooge.
Potato chips,
Doritos,
tortilla chips, Cheetos, cheese puffs, Fritos, corn chips, Lay's potato chips, Ruffles and Doritos, Cheetos and Fritos and Lay's brands. Pick up a holiday snack today at a Frito-Lay party display.
And to all a good, huh? Ooh. We made these just for you.
This Christmas, you can find Doughboy Bean Toys at your local grocer.
When you have a taste for the holidays, you want a soft drink that tastes like the holidays. You want the crisp, clean choice that's everyone's favorite icebreaker. 7-Up, the Uncola. Because you never know who might drop in.
Stop by the Winter Wonderland for holiday savings on all 7-Up products. And make the season bright.
He does exist!
They do exist.
Santa? Oh no. I have to save Christmas. Let's go! Tommy, James, Lucy, Ben, Judith.
You're right. No, the other right.
Who said not?
Give me Santa, now.
Hello?
The presents.
Yes?
They're going to the wrong people.
What?
Who's Tommy?
What have you done?
Did I ruin Christmas, Red?
Actually, buddy, I think you made it even better.
This Christmas, Pepsi would like to help you celebrate the holidays with a chance of winning a present from Mario in the Pepsi Nintendo Holiday Game, where you could win one of thousands of terrific Nintendo prizes, like these action sets, game packs, and best of all, the sensational new Game Boy. So hurry up and play before it's all over. Look for details on how to win your Nintendo prize wherever you see these Pepsi holiday displays.
My nose is a carrot.
I'd like to make a toast. Here's to the 3 newest members of the family: New Year's Ball, Snowman Ball, and Reindeer Ball. Each one is free with the purchase of any large combo.
I'm flying!
That's just wrong.
On the first day after Christmas, my true love gave to me leftover turkey. On the second day after Christmas, my true love gave to me turkey casserole that she made from leftover turkey. On the third day...
If Christmas is lingering longer than you expected, we have a suggestion. A pan pizza from Pizza Hut with pepperoni, mushrooms, almost any topping at all, except one.
Flaming turkey wings. Fa-la-la-la-la.
Come on, everyone, it's time. Hello, I'm Orville Redenbacher. This is my favorite time of the year, when we Redenbachers get together to share the best of the season. Of course, we pop up plenty of my light and fluffy gourmet popping corn and my gourmet microwave popping corn. Ready? You'll say they're the season's best, or I'm not.
Redenbacher.
Great grandpa to you. May your holiday be the best there is.
We're Beatrice.
McDonald's presents Holiday Huggable Muppet Babies.
Oh, did someone mention a hug, Kermie?
Right now, get your kids Baby Kermit, Baby Fozzie, or Baby Piggy. They're soft and huggable for a special price with any McDonald's food purchase.
Do you know where I could get a hug?
No, but if you sing a little of it, I think I can follow along.
ケンタッキーのファミリーパックに新発売のホームメイドスープが3個付きました。お得な3人分1500円。ケンタッキーフライドチキンです。
We all heard the same thing every Halloween night from our parents when we were kids. Do not eat any candy until I inspect everything in your bag. Filthy candy thieves. Get your own bag. They told us they were checking for tainted candy. They'd vaguely recalled the details of an investigative report they saw in the local news about neighborhood occultists hiding razor blades in apples.
Candy tampering.
Needles and other sharp objects.
One of the worst nightmares for parents.
Have we got your attention?
So all these years later, we want to know, were any of those Halloween stories about deadly candy true? Today on Weird History Food, we're going to find out whether or not all those stories about razor blades and apples are true or not. And now, let's go trick or treating. If you ever went out trick-or-treating as a kid, chances are incredibly high that your parents insisted on inspecting every individual piece of Halloween candy you brought home. They'd dump the contents of your bag on the dinner table, pick up each item, and give it the once-over. Then they'd place said items in one of 2 piles. One pile was reserved for clean, factory-sealed candy with familiar name brands that showed no signs of a third party's foul play. The other pile was designated for loose goods, weird oddities that looked suspect. Homemade Rice Krispie treats covered in saran wrap? Oh, that's suspicious. Fruit? Oh yeah, you can mess with that. Popcorn balls? Sticky and suspicious. Cigarette lighters? Oh, how'd that get in there? Basically, anything homemade or unwrapped or sealed in a wrapper that looked like it might have pinhole-sized punctures had to be immediately thrown away, if not set on fire at the police station. For the most part, your parents' hearts were in the right place. They grew up watching salacious prime-time investigative television journalism about the supposed deaths of children who succumbed to tampered Halloween treats. You also have to remember, this was decades before the internet. Today, with a quick Google search, any myth or urban legend can be confirmed or debunked in seconds, because everybody knows what's on the internet is true. But up until the early to mid-90s, we all just sort of accepted certain things like, you may be handed candy on Halloween that can kill you. In a pre-internet world, the idea of dealing with neighborhood creeps giving away strychnine-laced abba-zabbas was just the cost of being a kid in America on Halloween night. And pretty much everyone was willing to roll those dice in exchange for 2 pounds of free candy once a year. The thing is, journalists never reported the fact that kids were 12 times more likely to die from being struck by a car on Halloween than to receive a deadly treat by the local wacko. But their narrative changed in 1959. After the Halloween of '59, the once carefree ritual of trick-or-treating would never be the same again. That was the year the media discovered William V. Shine. William V. Shine was a successful and respected local dentist who lived in Fremont, California. He was married, in his mid-50s, and neighbors said he was kind, but mostly kept to himself. Then, on Halloween night in 1959, Shine handed out approximately 450 loose aloe pills, a mild form of laxative, to the neighborhood trick-or-treaters for no apparent reason. You know, apart from the lulz. According to old news reports, the local authorities were able to easily trace the pills back to Shine's house in less than 24 hours. But by then, he was on the lam. For 2 years, he would deny distributing the pills until 1961, when he was forced to admit everything to a state dental review panel in hopes of salvaging his license to practice. Shine eventually insinuated that it was a playful Halloween prank, but the damage was done. Although he never tampered with candy and no kids were ever reported to have taken Shine's pills, it was the first time the media was able to loosely associate tainted treats with Halloween, even if they were just over-the-counter laxatives. Which, while not exactly on the same level as hidden Razorblades, it is still a cruel and potentially dangerous prank to pull on a 6-year-old in a John Cena costume. Oh wait, John Cena hadn't been invented yet. Who were kids dressing up as in 1959? Oh yeah, Dwight D. Eisenhower. The media would eventually even give Shine's act a catchy name, Halloween Sadism, a perfect shorthand term for all the alleged danger the holiday poses to children. 5 years later, Helen File would give the hysteria even more fuel. File was an average 47-year-old housewife from Long Island and joked to friends that she was fed up with all of the teenagers who were still trick-or-treating in her neighborhood, years after she thought they aged out of it. So, on Halloween 1964, File gave every teenage trick-or-treater a homemade gift she assembled earlier in the day. Each package contained one of 3 gag prizes: dog biscuits, steel wool pads, or bottle cap-shaped ant buttons, packed with insecticide, which were clearly marked with a skull and crossbones. File told the teenagers the packages were a joke when she handed them out. The following day, a parent must have gone to the authorities because File was hauled in for endangering children, a charge she later pleaded guilty to. And she did technically hand out poison to trick-or-treaters. No matter how funny it seems at the time, you probably shouldn't do that. This was the second bona fide case of dangerous items being passed out to trick-or-treaters, and media outlets reacted accordingly by taking the incident and sensationalizing it as just the most recent example of an alarming trend of crazed sickos using the holiday as an excuse to abuse children. In other words, more evidence of Halloween sadism. Up until this point, Halloween sadism was a regional phenomenon. Reports from local newspapers and news broadcasts could always be counted on for sensationalized headlines about anonymous neighborhood creeps handing out deadly candy. But the country didn't really take the evils of Halloween seriously until October 28, 1970. That's the day the New York Times published an article that sort of confirmed what every skittish suburban mother had suspected forever, that there is a very good chance your kids' Halloween candy could kill them. The Times article had it all. Confirmed reports of razor blades and sewing pins hidden in apples, bubblegum sprinkled with lye, popcorn balls coated with camphor, loose sleeping pills, and red-hot oven-baked pennies that would burn children. It was pretty sick stuff. Except there was only one problem. None of the Times article's accusations were true. The journalist, Judy Clemsrud, just made it all up.
We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
Her goal was to get parents fired up over the dangers of Halloween, and she and the paper couldn't be bothered to back up their claims with any facts or statistics. Clemsrud's article, coupled with all of the cautionary tales parents have been rehashing for years and the crazy urban legends you'd hear at school, made it almost impossible to differentiate what was true and what was just manufactured hysteria. Manufactured, like all of that sweet, sweet candy. In many ways, urban legends are the backbone of Halloween. They're modern-day ghost stories. Someone has a friend or a cousin who once saw a kid eat a razor apple, or whose older sister drove home from Lover's Lane to find a terrifying hook lodged in the door handle of her car. Which, come on, may have just meant that AAA had a pirate working for them. All of the great Halloween lore and myths usually took flight at school. Kids sharing spooky stories during lunch about the cautionary Halloween tales they picked up from their parents and older siblings or just made up. But they all land firmly on the trick side of trick or treat. For example, there's no recorded example of a child ever receiving an apple on Halloween with a razor blade, stick pin, or sewing needle in it. As far as we know, it's just never happened.
No, it's an urban legend that never happened. We made it up.
And if you've seen old black and white images of apples with anything in them, those were staged, usually by local police or newspapers. The staged photos were intended to be used as examples, so parents knew what to look for within the Halloween treats their children brought home. Instead, they just further convinced people that the urban legend about razor blades and apples was 100% true. After all, if it were true, why would there be a picture of it in the newspaper? A similar urban legend about LSD-laced temporary tattoos started off the same way during the 1970s. According to the word on the street, dealers used to hand out temporary tattoos dosed with blotter acid. Because, dealers love giving away their product for free, especially to kids.
Rainbow fentanyl, pills the colors of candy.
This is every parent's worst nightmare as Halloween fast approaches.
Depending on the region, sometimes the tattoos contained strychnine, and sometimes the dealers were also Hell's Angels. The story goes that kids would affix the dosed temporary tattoos on their body parts. The acid or strychnine would eventually seep into their body, and the high was supposed to get them hooked, thus ensuring dealers a steady customer for life. The thing is, it appears these sinister acts never took place. But that hasn't stopped us from buying temporary tattoos every time we see them, just in case. Pesky things like the truth have never gotten in the way of a good urban legend. Media-driven panics like the threat of poisoned or otherwise booby-trapped candy may seem harmless if a little annoying. But they've given some people the idea of using Halloween sadism as a diversion to cover up their heinous crimes. Yeah, it turns out murderers watch the news too. In 1974, in the outskirts of Houston, Texas, Ronald Clark O'Brien carefully emptied out a bunch of pixie sticks tubes and filled them up with poison, then planted them in his 8-year-old son's Halloween candy stash. O'Brien also gave tainted pixie sticks to his son's friends because he intended to claim that his son had fallen victim to a crazed stranger handing out toxic treats. His son was fatally poisoned, and a subsequent police investigation found that O'Brien bought a life insurance policy for his son a couple weeks earlier. His attempt to blame Halloween stranger danger failed miserably, and O'Brien was sentenced in 1984. The myth of tainted Halloween candy has also been used to misreport tragic accidents. In 1970, 5-year-old Kevin Tostin went out trick-or-treating with his uncle, Henry Coleman, in a suburban Detroit area neighborhood. Later on in the evening, Coleman found Kevin unresponsive. Kevin's family must have known something nefarious happened because they immediately told police and the press that he'd been the victim of dosed Halloween candy. However, the subsequent investigation eventually found that Kevin had found his uncle's drug stash and had taken a heroin capsule. In order to cover up what could be perceived as negligence, Kevin's family had sprinkled some of the drug onto his candy to fuel the idea that he'd been the victim of a random trick-or-treat poisoning. National newspapers jumped to run with the "Poisoned Halloween Candy Kills Child" headlines the following day, even though that was far from what really happened. It didn't help that Kevin Tostin's alleged Halloween candy poisoning occurred 3 days after Judy Clemsrud's hyped-up New York Times article. While every news story and schoolyard tale you've ever heard about razorblade apples and tainted candy are untrue, your parents were ultimately correct in inspecting your Halloween candy every year, even if it momentarily delayed you blindly tearing into your candy haul like a starving badger. While there has never been any documented evidence of a child dying or even getting sick from a Halloween treat they received from trick-or-treating, it's still not a bad idea to check. After all, there was a documented case of an actual dentist slipping diarrhea pills into the sacks of hapless trick-or-treaters. And it's not like anybody needs help getting the runs after eating a half pound of candy on Halloween night. Ultimately, Halloween candy-related injuries have always been attributed to either targeted attacks from relatives, pranks, upset stomachs due to too much sugar, or someone who was looking to sue a candy manufacturer with deep pockets. And while it might not have totally justified your parents dutifully inspecting each and every piece, how else were they going to isolate you from your Halloween candy so they could skim their cut? And before you object, every single parent takes some Halloween candy without their child knowing. That is the whole point of having kids. The Filet-O-Fish is one of the most famous items on the McDonald's menu.
How many Filet-O-Fishes did you eat? That's over several months, Ryan.
Before the advent of its fishy shtick, the fast food giant only sold burgers, fries, milkshakes, and various drinks like Coke, root beer, milk, and coffee. These classic items served the chain well for over a decade, but as the franchise expanded, so did the needs of the fast food-loving public, and the Filet-O-Fish caught our collective attention. Hook, line, and sinker. But how much fish is actually in a Filet-O-Fish? And is it even fish? Well, today we're trawling the depths to figure out what's actually in a Filet-O-Fish. Okay, time to get to the bottom of this fish tank. Lou Groen was a World War II veteran and restaurateur who opened the Cincinnati area's first ever McDonald's location on January 13, 1959. By that point, Groen had already managed a successful cafe and served as the president of the Restaurant Association of Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. So he should have had what it took to bring Mickey D's to a whole new market. But much to Groen's dismay, business was slow to start. With the help of his wife and children, his humble fast food joint treaded water for 2 years, but just couldn't make enough money to stay afloat. Their worst business day of the week was Friday, and not because the entire town was following some diet trend, although that was technically kind of the case. Groen's McDonald's only made around $75 every Friday because 87% of the population in his corner of Cincinnati was Catholic, and Catholics abstained from eating red meat on Fridays. Unsurprisingly, this was bad news for a burger restaurant. If Groen wanted to keep his head above water, he'd have to come up with a way to reel in crowds on their holy days. Luckily for him, he wasn't the only fast food restaurant in town. Another local chain, Frisch's Big Boy, was thriving. And Groen determined that the uptick in business had to do with the fish sandwich the place was serving to its Catholic patrons. It became his mission to net himself some of that business. So he went to work cooking up his own recipe for his newly dubbed Filet-O-Fish sandwich. In 1961, Groen took his sandwich all the way to the top, traveling to the McDonald's corporate office in Chicago to meet legendary owner Ray Kroc. But Kroc didn't take the bait. In a 2006 interview, Groen told Business Courier that Kroc was opposed to the idea because he didn't want his McDonald's restaurants stunk up with the smell of fish. As it happened, Kroc thought up his own meat-based alternative for practicing Catholics. Enter the Hula Burger. Kroc's innovative vegetarian burger was, wait for it, a slice of pineapple and cheese on a hamburger bun. Points for creativity? The renowned businessman was confusingly confident that his sweet and cheesy treat would have a mass appeal, but he didn't want to dismiss Groen's idea outright. Apparently, in the mood for some friendly competition, Kroc left the ultimate decision up to the public. On Good Friday, 1962, Groen's Filet-O-Fish sandwich and Kroc's Hula Burger battled it out in a few select McDonald's locations. The terms of the deal were simple. Whichever item sold the most by the end of the day would earn a permanent spot on the menu. Unfortunately for Kroc, it wasn't so much a battle as it was a slaughter. 350 Filet-O-Fish sandwiches were sold on that Good Friday, while the Hula Burger floundered with a measly 6. Talk about shooting fish in a barrel. After swallowing his pride and presumably a fish sandwich, Kroc kept his word. Throughout the next few years, the Filet-O-Fish was rolled out at McDonald's franchise locations across the country. And in 1965, it officially became the first new item added to McDonald's national menu since Ray Kroc took over the chain. Kroc joked that after all that work, the Pope would change the rules. And sure enough, the same year the Filet-O-Fish went national, the Second Vatican Council announced that red meat was no longer off the menu on all Fridays. Now, carnivorous Catholics only had to give up their meat during Lent. But that didn't stop the Filet-O-Fish from becoming an exceedingly popular staple at McDonald's locations across the country. Over the 6 decades it has enjoyed being on the menu, it disappeared only briefly in 1996 as a part of McDonald's poorly conceived deluxe line. It returned soon after due to public outcry. Also, over those 6 decades, the Filet-O-Fish has been the subject of several marketing campaigns, though you probably don't remember most of them. As it turns out, the big fish sells itself, and the sandwich's original slogan, "The fish that catches people," told us as much. Mickey D's stuck with that catchy slogan until 1976, when they introduced a fresh face to their growing lineup of mascot characters. Mr. Filet-O-Fish was a smiling fish wearing a fetching hat and a sea captain's jacket, with a McDonald's logo emblazoned on the front. He carried a fishing net and encouraged hungry guests to try the Filet-O-Fish for a surprisingly good taste. Despite Phil's best efforts to sell out his brethren and save his own tail, he was retired just a year later. In place of Phil, McDonald's went through a slew of advertisements for the sandwich, including 1976's Food for Thought campaign, 1978's Deliciously Different slogan, and 2009's iconic Give Me Back That Filet-O-Fish commercials. As for Grown, he opened a total of 42 McDonald's locations over the years and raked in millions of dollars until he sold the lot back to the company in 1986. The titan of industry passed away in 2011. But his legacy lives on in his family, with many of his relatives owning their own McDonald's franchises, which all proudly serve his fishy creation. Okay, so we know the history of the sandwich. Now it's time to find out what's actually in it, because there are few phrases that send more terror through a foodie's spine than fast food seafood. Along with its ever-changing marketing campaigns, the Filet-O-Fish has seen a fair few changes to its recipe over the years. Originally, Grown sandwich was a simple piece of battered halibut, tartar sauce, and a slice of cheese between 2 hamburger buns. Between its invention and its official launch in 1965, Kroc and Grown made a few tweaks. The first was trimming down that slice of cheese. You may have noticed that the modern Filet-O-Fish, as we know it today, only comes with a half slice of cheese, rather than a whole square. According to McDonald's Big Cheeses, this was because an entire slice would overpower the taste of fish. But some suspect it was merely a cost-cutting measure. The next change McDonald's made to the original recipe was the bun. Rather than a traditional toasted hamburger bun, the Filet-O-Fish is served on a fluffier, steamed bun, which helps keep the taste and texture of the fish from being overpowered. The third and final change to Grown's recipe was the fish itself. Halibut turned out to be too expensive to use on a nationwide scale. Originally, the Filet-O-Fish was to be sold for 25 cents, but the use of halibut made it cost 30. Cod became the fish of choice for the new sandwich. But in order to avoid association with cod liver oil, they called the main ingredient by its fancier name, North Atlantic Whitefish. Instead, the deceptively marketed cod was the de facto Filet-O-Fish ingredient for 50 years at the fast food chain, but that changed in 2013. After North Atlantic whitefish were placed on the critically endangered species list, McDonald's switched to the cheap and sustainable Alaska pollock, which it still uses today. But no matter what kind of fish you're slicing, none of them are square. So why do the Filet-O-Fish patties boast such a specific square shape? Well, according to Mickey D's corporate office, their Alaska pollock is layered in whole fillets and then cut into convenient blocks of fish flesh, which can then be easily processed and stored. And we all know, squares are the most delicious shape. The breading on the patty also contains bleached white flour made with chemicals like benzoyl peroxide, potassium bromate, or chlorine. Fish and chlorine usually don't mix, except at McDonald's. Chlorine and peroxide aren't the only chemicals you may worry about when you pull up to your local McDonald's drive-thru for the catch of the day. There's also a not-so-healthy dose of hydrogenated soybean oil in there for good measure. Hydrogenated soybean oil is used in all sorts of fast food items because it helps keep them shelf-stable for longer periods of time. But it has also been linked to diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. And finally, the Filet-O-Fish is also hiding polysorbate 80, which is made from dehydrated sugar, alcohol, and fatty acids. It helps to reduce fat separation in food, but it's also used in household cleaners and cosmetics. Hey, that Filet-O-Fish wants to look good. If you're still hungry after all that toxic talk, we don't blame you. There's a reason the Filet-O-Fish is as popular as it is. And that reason is, it's delicious. It's so delicious that over the years, other famous fast food chains have tried to muscle in on McDonald's turf in the seafood surf wars. Arby's, Bojangles, Burger King, Dairy Queen, Popeyes, Wendy's, and White Castle have all gone fishing for their own slice of the fish pie. And while each restaurant puts its own spin on the classic sandwich, the public remains divided on which one is truly the most delicious. But surprisingly, there's no debate on which is best for you. According to a 2023 Men's Health article, even with all those worrying additives, the McDonald's Filet-O-Fish takes home the title of healthiest fish sandwich. Maybe that's why it still reigns supreme, selling around 300 million sandwiches annually. That's a lot of pollock. Even after all this time, the initial spark for the Filet-O-Fish's invention proves to be relevant, with around 25% of those sales occurring during Lent, bringing it all the way back to Lou Groen's original idea of making a sandwich to serve to his Catholic customers. Just don't let them go to Captain D's. Christmas comes but once a year, and when it does, it brings with it sidewalk Santas, Mariah Carey, and of course, eggnog. But have you ever wondered, what is eggnog? Does it have an egg in it? Does it have a nog in it? Where does it come from? And what does it want from us? Well, today we're going to the bottom of the punch bowl to answer, what the hell is eggnog? Okay, 'tis the season to be noggy. Okay, so all kidding aside, we do actually know what eggnog is. We looked it up. The bizarre holiday beverage, which was once known as milk punch or egg milk punch, does in fact have eggs in it. In fairness, they did kind of tell us. According to the Food Network, eggnog is traditionally made with eggs, egg yolk, sugar, milk, heavy cream, and vanilla extract. That already sounds pretty good. But eggnog is also usually juiced with an extra little holiday spirit. Or in other words, it's usually spiked with more booze than a fraternity bath mat. The Food Network recommends brandy, and using whiskey or rum certainly won't get you into any trouble with the Christmas police. But at least one professional bartender encourages people to get creative and try eggnog spiked with things like mezcal and creme de cacao. Whatever you choose, good eggnog is usually then topped off with a little freshly grated nutmeg, cinnamon sticks, cloves, or star anise. Or all of those things, if you happen to be the extravagant type. If it's all combined correctly, you should wind up with a sweet, creamy beverage that has a texture like melted ice cream and a custardy flavor, cut slightly by the booze. But if you don't have any fancy alcohol or star anise, don't let that stop you. One of the great beauties of eggnog is that pretty much anybody can make it at home, because it doesn't require any expensive or difficult-to-find ingredients to create, nor any great culinary skill to pull off. Which is to say, you can whip up a batch if you use your noggin. Oh yeah. That covers the eggs, but right about now you might be asking, what gives with the nog? Well, to be perfectly honest, no one is exactly sure where the nog in the name eggnog came from. What we do know is that the first known use of the word nog originated in 1693. But beyond that, there are only theories. There are a lot of them. The Oxford English Dictionary, for example, reports that nog was a kind of strong beer brewed in East Anglia. But others have pointed out that the word could just as easily be derived from noggin, a Middle English term for a small, carved wooden mug that was used to drink alcohol, and is also the name of the thing that starts hurting if you've had too much. Yet another theory holds that the name is derived from grog, a colonial-era name for rum that was allegedly served with eggs and was known as eggengrog, which eventually became eggnog. Oh, I like that one. Still others think it has something to do with a Scottish drink called nuggedale, the word nugget referring to being warmed with a hot poker. The online etymology dictionary, on the other hand, claims the term is an Americanism, and that nog comes from an archaic word for strong ale. It could also be named after Quark's nephew on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. There's simply no way to know. We may not know where the nog and eggnog comes from, but the drink itself almost certainly came from the same country that gave us James Bond, the Beatles, and King Ralph. Jolly old England. Culinary historians generally agree that eggnog is, in one way or another, derived from a hot, milky, ale-like drink called posset. Curdled with ale or sometimes wine, posset was popular in early medieval Britain. The drink has evolved quite a bit over the centuries. 13th century monks drank it with eggs and figs. A 17th century recipe calls for a heated mixture of cream, 18 egg yolks, 8 egg whites, cinnamon, mace, nutmeg, and 1 pint of sack wine. Is that like box wine? Because if it is, we've got you covered. And through all the variations, posset stayed popular in England all the way into the 19th century. It's weird to think now, but way back in medieval times, eggnog was mostly reserved for the rich. Why? Because milk, eggs, and booze were expensive. and were generally the kind of thing you had to be wealthy to enjoy. Beverages made from such costly ingredients were commonly used to toast to health and, more importantly, prosperity. And it was English settlers in search of prosperity who brought eggnog to the New World. Since most of the colonists were farmers, they were pretty stacked with chickens and cows, which meant beverages that included milk and eggs were suddenly easy to make. Cheap rum was also readily available, and that has remained unchanged in the intervening centuries. An affordable supply of ingredients may be why eggnog became popular in both the US and Canada, where Francophiles refer to the beverage as lait de poule, or chicken's milk. These days, eggnog is practically synonymous with Christmas. However, the Bible conspicuously doesn't mention it. So how did the association begin? Well, for starters, the fact that it's served warm makes it an ideal winter drink. On top of that, nutmeg, cinnamon, and vanilla are all considered seasonal flavors. And since they frequently turned up in eggnog, eggnog became associated with the season. However, most researchers place the beginning of eggnog as a Christmas drink during the American Revolution. You see, during the Revolutionary War, rum from the Caribbean wasn't quite as plentiful. Since that was the rum of choice for eggnog, they decided to preserve the rum in the nog for special occasions, like Christmas. That being said, lots of Revolutionary-era Americans simply had to make other arrangements to spike their nog. Most turned to domestic spirits like whiskey, bourbon, or even moonshine. Hey, any port in a storm. You could even use port. Whether you needed to chop down a cherry tree, defeat King George, or drink a whole lot of booze, George Washington got results, and eggnog was no exception. The father of America also had his own personal nog recipe. If you're looking to do it the way Mr. Dollar Bill did, his recipe calls for a quart of cream, a quart of milk, a dozen tablespoons of sugar, and all the booze in your pantry. George apparently made his nog with a pint of brandy, half a pint of rye whiskey, half a pint of Jamaica rum, and a quarter pint of sherry. You don't want to overdo it on the sherry. It's a pretty good recipe, but George neglected one minor detail. He forgot to mention how many eggs go in it. The man was so laser-focused on recording the proper amount of alcohol that he forgot the primary ingredient. But his chefs learned to guesstimate the recipe with about a dozen eggs. Washington, it is worth noting, wasn't the only U.S. president with a yen for nog. Dwight D. Eisenhower, America's 34th chief executive, also apparently loved making the stuff. And according to reports, nothing could get you drunk faster than Ike's eggnog. We like Ike, and Ike likes nog. Ike actually remembered to include the eggs in his recipe, which also called for a pound of sugar, a quart of coffee cream, a quart of whipped cream, and a quart of bourbon. Correspondents for the National Review found it to be very alcoholic, surprisingly light and creamy in density, not in richness or calories. That's high praise for some nog. Also sometimes known as the Grog Mutiny, which sounds like a pirate labor strike, the 1826 Eggnog Riot went down on Christmas Day. When else? At the United States Military Academy. The students of West Point held a Christmas party where they got absolutely cheer-faced on whiskey-spiked eggnog. The possession of alcohol was allegedly a serious offense at the academy and could result in punishments as serious as expulsion. So the cadets lied about keeping the nog alcohol-free and then smuggled in a load of whiskey big enough to cause a riot. According to a witness, a large number of the cadets got on a spree and became excessively riotous, setting all officers at defiance, and even with a drawn sword, chasing one to his room. The officers called for troops to round up the troublemakers, but that just turned the students into a mob, which eventually involved a third of all cadets at the school. Long story short, 70 cadets were arrested and 20 were court-martialed. One of the cadets who was involved in the riot but never faced a court-martial was future president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. That guy just never got over breaking the rules. On its official website, the U.S. Army says of the eggnog riots, "Years have passed since the cadets overindulged on eggnog, but the moral of their story is still applicable. Too much of the good stuff can lead to serious consequences." Or a nap on the couch. Sometimes the American version of a product, no matter how beloved, just isn't right for the rest of the world. That's why Mexico has its own version of Breaking Bad, called Metastasis. And it's why a whole bunch of countries have decided to put their own local spin on eggnog. In Puerto Rico, for example, they have an eggnog-like drink known as coquito. The name means little coconut, and the beverage is made with coconut milk, as well as cream of coconut, sweetened condensed milk, vanilla, nutmeg, clove, cinnamon, and Puerto Rican rum. That is a hell of a nog. If that interests you, you might find it on some menus under the name Puerto Rican eggnog. Similarly, Mexico has its own version known as rompope, which is made with eggs, milk, vanilla flavor, and of course, some festive hooch, usually Mexican rum or grain alcohol, with Mexican cinnamon usually finding its way into the mixture as well. Peru, for their part, has Biblia con pisco, an eggnog-like drink made with a pumice brandy called pisco. And across the Atlantic, Germany has a beer-based variation called Biersuppe. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You could fill an entire It's a Small World ride with just the different eggnogs of the world. Although you'd probably wish you'd had a few before you started. Eggnog is not just a spice and/or rum delivery system. It can actually serve as a key ingredient in a whole bunch of tasty-sounding mixed drinks. For example, take some ordinary store-bought eggnog and mix it with vanilla-flavored vodka and some amaretto. Pour into a martini glass, throw in some cinnamon, nutmeg, and a cinnamon stick, and bam! You've got yourself an eggnog martini. Or if you're the kind of person who wouldn't say "niet" to a white Russian eggnog, all you need is some nog, ice, vodka, Kahlua, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Pumpkin spice is optional. And if you're lucky enough to have some jalapeno-infused tequila, mezcal, chai syrup, and chocolate shavings, then you can make yourself a spicy horchata-style eggnog. We hear it's muy bueno. Needless to say, if you leave any of these for Santa, some kids are going to be opening the wrong gifts on Christmas morning. Eggnog was wildly popular in the 1800s, and though its popularity dipped a bit during the Prohibition era, for obvious reasons, as soon as the booze was flowing again, so was the eggnog. By the 1940s, varieties with and without alcohol were being sold in supermarkets. And by the 1960s, it was being mass-produced to meet the overwhelming Christmas season demand. So, how is eggnog doing today? Well, despite health concerns, a relatively hefty price, and the fact that Americans consume over 40% less milk than they did 50 years ago, according to Forbes, eggnog sales have actually quadrupled in the last 50 years. However, it's only popular during the Christmas season, because only freaks drink eggnog on December 26th. A lot of folks do get surly over the fact that eggnog is only available 2 months a year. So what is going on there? Well, for starters, most commercial eggnogs have, let's say, a festive amount of sugar. This is because most recipes take into account that the drink will likely be diluted with alcohol and ice. So if you're knocking back the nog without any booze, you're probably drinking way more sugar than you realize. Sugar can obviously be addictive. So the question then becomes, how much sugar are we really taking in here? According to CNN, the holiday drink often tops 20 grams of sugar, the equivalent of 5 teaspoons, for a mere half-cup serving. So a cup of eggnog contains roughly the same amount of sugar as a bag of Skittles. A few sips of that will make some fairies dance in your head for sure. In the same CNN story, Stephen Young, a dairy and food technologist, pointed out that eggnog is a lot like ice cream. It's cold, and it's sweet, and it tastes good, especially when you haven't had it for 10 or 11 months. He makes an excellent point. Eggnog's narrow window of availability probably does play a key psychological role in its appeal. After all, there's just something about a thing you can only get for a limited time that makes it all the more sweet, and almost forces you to overindulge. But isn't that what the holidays are all about?
There's nothing quite like a day at the State Fair. There are rides, games, and more crazy fried foods than you could probably ever dared to dream of. Lucky for you, we've made an exhaustive list so that you can try and figure out how you might fare with the fair at the fair. By which we mean, today, we're going to take a look at every crazy food you can find at a state fair. Okay, we hope you're ready to hear the terms deep fried and on a stick repeated a lot. According to the good people at Merriam-Webster, a fair is a gathering of buyers and sellers at a particular place and time for trade. The history of fairs is a little cloudy, but one thing that's very clear is that people have been going to fairs for a really long time. How long? Well, the Old Testament's Book of Ezekiel talks up the ancient city of Tarshish by calling attention to the multitude of the kinds of riches with silver, iron, tin, and lead they traded in thy fairs. So we're talking about a practice that's thousands and thousands of years old. As for America, King George II was sponsoring agricultural fairs for the English colonists in the New World at least as early as 1745. And in 1811, a Massachusetts farmer named Elkanah Watson became the so-called father of U.S. agricultural fairs when he organized the first county agricultural fair on behalf of the Berkshire Agricultural Society. That first one was really more of an animal show where prizes were given out to sheep and cattle with Riz, but it would evolve to include exhibits about manufacturing, dances, and a parade. The success of Watson's Fair would inspire similar events in other states, many of which became long-running traditions. By the end of the 19th century, railroads had turbocharged the popularity of state fairs by making them cheap and easy to attend. In an era before the internet, television, and even radio, they were the places Americans were most likely to see cutting-edge technological developments. And that wasn't going to change for a while. For example, state fairs would be the first place Americans would get a look at things like electric lights and automobiles. Over the 20th century, however, the U.S. economy became increasingly more industrial and less agricultural. Following the trends, state fairs became less about things like who had the best-looking pig, and more about things like games, rides, and concerts, and some of the craziest foods you've ever imagined. If you've been to a county fair recently, then you know the teacup ride is actually the least likely thing there to upset your stomach. And that's because pretty much everything they now sell to eat is some deep-fried monstrosity practically guaranteed to take years off your life. But it wasn't always that way. Deep-fried treats like corn dogs, french fries, and funnel cakes became a part of the state fair culinary landscape starting in the late 1980s. By the 1990s and early aughts, deep-fried fair foods, including candy bars and Twinkies, were becoming something of a cultural phenomenon. This was at least partially due to the State Fair of Texas's widely popular Big Tex Choice Awards, which judges deep-fried treats and then crowns winners in the categories of most creative and best taste. Since then, the whole thing has gotten a bit out of control. In the spirit of crazy memeable foods and the KFC Double Down, snack vendors at state fairs now seem to be locked in an eternal game of one-upmanship. They're all looking to come up with the craziest, most unlikely sounding, and attention-grabbing fried treats, knowing that fairgoers will buy them just for the novelty and tell their friends. And it's big business. More than a few state fairs make tens of millions of dollars on food every year. Okay, so imagine you've already arrived at the fair early in the AM and you need a balanced breakfast to start your day. No need to panic. The fair has pancakes with butter, eggs, bacon, donuts, and coffee. So, all the usual stuff, just maybe not how you're used to having it. For example, those pancakes? They're part of the pancake burger you can find at the Nebraska State Fair. And they'll come with a burger topped by trimmings and your choice of condiments. That includes maple syrup, of course, because, pancakes. Also, that butter, it's deep-fried. They make deep-fried butter by dipping balls of frozen butter in sweetened buttermilk batter and then deep-frying them. The treat, which was original to the Texas State Fair and is now fairly ubiquitous, has been compared to an inside-out pancake that is the batter on the outside and the melted butter within. Naturally, the eggs are also deep-fried. At the Arkansas State Fair, for example, they take a hard-boiled egg, dip it in batter and oil, and then serve it with a variety of dipping sauces like sweet and sour or jalapeno ranch. And of course, no one expects you to have eggs without bacon. If you're at the Maui County Fair, you might opt for the chicken fried bacon. And bacon-wrapped caramel apples are available at fairs everywhere. For the record, that's an apple on a stick, dipped in melted caramel with bacon sprinkled on top, wrapped around it, or both. After that, if you still have room for a donut and 3 cheeseburgers, we recommend hitting the Iowa State Fair for the triple cheeseburger donut. It's a Krispy Kreme donut sliced in half with 3 beef patties and 6 slices of American cheese stuffed between them. Finally, you'll want that nice hot cup of coffee. But since this is a fair, it's going to be a deep-fried coffee. Okay, it's not a beverage. Deep-fried coffee is actually donut balls that have been infused with coffee and then fried up. But maybe that all sounds like too much work and you only want to make one stop for your breakfast. Well, the Minnesota State Fair has you covered with their breakfast on a stick. That's a sausage patty, Canadian bacon, an egg, and 2 types of cheese sandwiched between 2 pancakes, deep-fried, and then placed on a stick for your convenience. But don't fill up, there's still 2 more meals, snacks, and dessert to go. After that skimpy breakfast, you'll probably want to do some snacking while you make your way about the fairgrounds. We've all heard about the deep-fried Oreos and deep-fried Snickers, but we recommend starting with something light, like the deep-fried jelly beans. That's another fair snack that made its first appearance in Texas, but is now found pretty much everywhere. The Massachusetts State Fair, for example, has a version where the jelly beans are rolled in funnel cake batter, fried, and then doused in powdered sugar. Similarly gooey and delicious is the deep-fried bubblegum. Despite the name, it's not actually gum, because apparently gum doesn't really fry well. Instead, it's marshmallow with bubblegum flavoring, deep fried into something that will make you forget all about regular old gum. But maybe you don't want deep fried candy for some crazy reason. Maybe you want something a little bit healthier. Well, if that's the case, be on the lookout for a pickle pop. It's essentially a pickle-flavored ice pop that has 0 calories. And incidentally, if you're seriously into pickles, you can increasingly find Kool-Aid pickles at fairs. They're pickles marinated in Kool-Aid, which makes them both sweet and sour. Unfortunately, though, there's no Kool-Aid pickle man to burst through your wall yelling, "Oh yeah!" The Illinois State Fair is famous for their tornado potato, which is a thin swirl of fried potato wrapped around a stick, basically making it a giant spiral french fry. And at the North Carolina State Fair, you should hunt down the deep-fried Girl Scout cookies, which include both deep-fried Samoas and deep-fried Thin Mints. Also, be on the lookout for things like deep-fried Kool-Aid, deep-fried cookie dough on a stick, Snap, Crackle, and Fluff on a stick, deep-fried beer, and giant deep-fried gummy bears. Okay, you've had a hearty breakfast and managed to snack your way to the afternoon. It's time to start thinking about lunch and maybe even what you'll be having for dinner later. Obviously, you're going to have to try the deep-fried scorpions. Now, you're probably assuming that just like with the deep-fried bubblegum, the name is just a name. It doesn't really have scorpions in it, right? Wrong.
Oh, whoa. The pop.
They're literally just fried scorpions, and you can get them at the Arizona State Fair, where all sorts of fried bugs are becoming increasingly popular, and they come plain or chocolate covered. And if scorpions aren't the predator you'd prefer to have deep fried and served to you on the way to the Tilt-A-Whirl, you can always get the fried alligator on a stick. Yes, it's an alligator that's been skewered and deep fried. And in case you're curious, people who have had it say it tastes like pork, and has a texture like veal. If scorpions and alligators sound too dangerous, however, you might just want to go for the seemingly safer shrimp corn dog, which is shrimp on a stick dipped in corn dog batter. On the other hand, if you're at the Minnesota State Fair, you might want to grab the spaghetti and meatballs on a stick. If you're wondering how they get spaghetti and meatballs, of all things, to stay on a stick, the answer is that they're mashed into balls, dunked in garlic butter, and then in the deep fryer. And of course, some marinara sauce is usually drizzled on top. If all that sounds too heavy for you, you might just want a nice salad. But it's the fair, so it'll have to be salad on a stick. That's another one from Iowa, and it's just what it sounds like. Lettuce, cherry tomatoes, and chunks of cheese on a stick. Sure, maybe it doesn't sound as filling as something like the Krispy Kreme Sloppy Joe, which is also a real fair food, but it's nice to know the fair vendors didn't forget about the salad folks. Other storied state fair entrees include the deep-fried pig ears you can get at the Minnesota State Fair, the deep-fried peanut butter and jelly they love down at the Virginia State Fair, and the deep-fried White Castle burgers at California's Orange County Fair. Finally, if you finished your whole breakfast on a stick, tornado potato, deep-fried scorpion, and whatever other crazy crap you bought to eat, then you've earned yourself dessert, State Fair style. And if you're at the Utah State Fair, then that probably means deep-fried green Jell-O, which is, well, deep-fried green Jell-O. At the Wisconsin State Fair, it means deep-fried s'mores, which are graham crackers, marshmallows, and chocolate, dunked in pancake batter and deep-fried. Just one bite and you'll say, "Please, sir, I want s'more." At the Tennessee State Fair, they've been serving deep-fried goo-goo clusters since way back in 1912. So William Howard Taft might have had a few when he was president, if that means anything to you. And why wouldn't he? They're deep-fried marshmallows, peanuts, caramel, and chocolate. Other goodies you might grab for your fair dessert include the hot beef sundae, spaghetti ice cream, chocolate-covered deep-fried cheesecake, bacon-covered cinnamon rolls, and deep-fried taco cheesecake. So now that you know what's out there, we recommend going right to your local state fair and figuring out for yourself which of these crazy foods is the fairest of them all. So what do you think? And what's your favorite thing to eat at a fair? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from Weird History.